Hello and welcome. I'm Chris Braitch, and this is the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I am an emotional health and leadership coach and co-founder of the not-for-profit Seen and Heard, which supports those seeking healing, connection, and systemic change. My vision is to move myself and the world around me towards connection and compassion. And each week, I will connect with amazing guests who are on their journey to bring about meaningful change in their own lives and the world around them. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Welcome everybody to the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I have the great delight today to be joined by David Greenwood. David is a solicitor with the firm Switalskis and is dedicated to improving the rights of child abuse survivors and advocating for better child protection laws. He has successfully assisted thousands of abuse survivors in pursuing compensation claims, guiding them through every stage of the process. David's national reputation as a top child abuse lawyer is built on his outstanding work, especially in child sexual exploitation and group cases. Welcome, David.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me on. Yeah,
it's wonderful to find some time with you. We've had a nice conversation really for the last sort of 6 to 9 months, which I've really enjoyed. And we met in person originally because your firm very kindly supported Marcus Pollitt and the Mummified play that he put on as an abuse survivor and a boarding school survivor down in Brighton. How did you find that play?
that's right. It was incredibly evocative of the journey that a lot of people have to endure when they've been through boarding school and have had things that have not quite been right happen to them. So Marcus putting it all together into a play was really good. I just think that doing things like that and using creativity to convey the message is a great way of doing it, rather than just, shall we say, just fairly turgid black and white articles on a page or books or whatever. I just think it brings it to life and it brings people together. What happened those couple of nights that we were down in Brighton was that we had sort of sessions afterwards, didn't we? Question and answer sessions, which were well attended, and we teased out a lot of stories that people had been through, and a lot of things that were wrong with the system and that needed to be improved, and our ideas for improving them. And it gave us a lot of hope, I think, to come out the other side and improve things for people who have been, children who are in vulnerable positions, generally, not just boarding schools. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention that because I think, speaking with yourself or our legal ambassadors, Richard Scorer and Kim Leslie, Tom Fletcher, people like that, there is a real, and we'll find out more about your story today, but there is a real passion behind this. This is not just a job, like the work that you're doing, because it's, there's the civil side of things. But actually, as you said, so much has been involvement in the campaigning side. And actually, our original connection was through the Act on ICSA group, which is the Survivors Trust charity. And so, I met you in person at Marcus's thing, but I'd seen you on, 10, 15 Zoom calls before that. Amazing work, providing a really good legal eye and energy behind that Act on ICSA campaign as well. So thank you for your work in that area.
Likewise, back at you. Your website and the things that you're doing are really excellent. There's nothing like it out there, I don't think. And it's so informative. There's all sorts of little articles and videos and that kind of thing that are pretty up to date as well. So I'm really impressed with what you're doing as well, Chris. Yeah,
bless you.
There's a need for it.
Yeah, thank you, David. So let's get into it today. And I always love to. We're going to cover all sorts. We're going to cover ICSA, the Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse. We're going to kind of cover what's happening now, 3 years after, what it was like when you were going through it all, your journey, and also we're going to speak to abuse in institutions and supporting abuse survivors, etc. But I always begin at the beginning. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your journey into the work you now do. How were things for you when you were young? What was your story?
Oh God, my story is quite boring. I just come from a, ordinary family up north. Every generation of my family until my generation have been miners. Um, so we're from West Yorkshire, um, and yeah, I was privileged enough to get into a grammar school and did okay. And well, my dad died when I was 11, and I just said to myself after that, look, I'm going to do something with this life. And so I got into a grammar school, did okay, and got a professional qualification to be a solicitor, and thought, I'm going to do something with this. Then what happened was I did a lot of crime work in the early 90s, in and out of police stations and courts. And some of the younger guys who I was representing were complaining that they had sexual abuse carried out on them in residential schools, local authority residential schools. And so I thought, hang on, this is not just happening to one or two. This is dozens of guys that I know who had been through the court system. So I started a sort of a group case in the 90s in the West Yorkshire children's homes, and it's sort of snowballed from there. Really, my work. Yeah, I did residential children's homes in the 90s, and then it moved on to churches in the late 90s, Catholic and C of E, and then boarding schools have been a big part of my career since since 2000, really. Yeah, just before 2000, and yeah, continue to be. And there's all sorts of different spin-offs from there where people have been unfortunate enough to be predated on by these horrible people. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, David, and thank you for sharing about your dad as well. I'm really sad to hear that as part of your journey. Yeah, it really touches me. As I lost my mum at 14, and yeah, I can connect to that. It's yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. You said that kind of you made that decision, like I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something with my life. So do you remember that being quite conscious, or did you just feel a drive and energy that no, I've got something to do here?
Well, oh God, this is a bit of a therapy session, isn't it? But looking back, it's something like that is a significant impact on the family. It could have been sink or swim. Lots of families sink. My dear mum, who is 88 and still alive, was a strong woman. She kept it going on a bit of a shoestring after Dad died. And I thought, things can easily go the other way, especially in the circles that I knocked about in and my brothers knocked about in. We could have gone a different way, and I just thought, I've got an opportunity here. I'm not gonna go down the usual route of my brother's friends and things, because I'm the youngest of the family. But I'm gonna try and do something with this education. So yeah, that's really it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
You forget about this, don't you? I mean, you just get on with your life, and you forget about all these thoughts that you've had in the past and what sends you down a path, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. I just, I asked because I connect to it so much. I guess I was in the camp of your brother's friends. I just, I only found my way to sorting myself out much later on. I did go off the rails for a while after losing mum and drinking drugs, all sorts of things. But yeah, I found my way back in the end, and that's what matters.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. And really
You've
hearing
got to,
how you. Sorry, you're going to say something?
yeah, when you're an adult, you've got to be responsible, haven't you? Yeah. I know that you're a parent, so you've got to shape up when you're a parent.
Yeah, that's a thing. All parents and people who've got nieces and nephews and all that. They know that it's a real. I've always felt a pressure to sort of break the cycle a little bit. With and that comes up a lot in the boarding school stuff actually, and it will have come up in your early work as well, because it's intergenerational, this stuff. Families who get themselves in a real mess, so generation on generation, and whether it's sending kids off to boarding school, or whether it's abuse running down family lines, or whether it's sort of criminality, poverty that pushes people into the system, whether it be the criminal justice system or care homes, etc. So yeah, I mean, yeah, as a parent, I've always felt that thing that okay, I'm not going to get it all right, but I do need. It stops here. Just sort of trauma stuff stops here as best as I can.
Good,
Yeah.
good, good.
Mm,
You got to work on it every day, I suppose. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Thank you. And hearing your journey, so your journey into the specialism of law, I can really get that, because we had John Wedger on the podcast a little while ago. He was at the event, so we were both at an
Yeah.
event on Monday night, which was a brilliant uh, House of Commons screening of the film Bordering on Insanity, with a Q&A afterwards. John Wedger was there, and it just reminded me, and as we were speaking today, of some of the conversation there. And obviously, he was a police detective. He was at the sort of thin end of the wedge, working on the streets, particularly in vice, prostitution, etc. And he was saying that of the sort of hardcore street level intravenous drug users, the prostitutes, he hadn't met one yet that hadn't been sexually abused. It was always in their stories. Not so much, the sort of the higher end escorting and things like that, but the street prostitution. He said it was there in every story. And it sounds like, as you were working through this, criminal justice, these young people who get themselves in trouble, you're hearing these stories coming through. What kind of thing, you know, kept coming through very strongly for people who were falling into criminality, or finding themselves in difficulty early on? What was happening in their families or in the care homes?
Well, it was generally neglect that caused them to fall into local authority care. Parents not being attentive, letting them run riot, not behaving, not going to school. So they're hoiked out of their situations and put into residential children's homes in the 70s and early 80s. Well, and 80s, yeah. That was the fashion, I suppose. The social services fashion to put kids straight into residential homes rather than into foster care. So that was it. And they're in foster care. There are and there's a lot of demand for care staff. They're not always vetted properly. Well, they're hardly ever vetted properly, they're um, only now being compulsorily registered. Yeah, there were a lot of shady characters as care workers in these homes, and yeah, vulnerable boys mainly, some girls. Yeah, probably about 40% girls actually were in these homes that I was litigating over in the 90s, and yeah, that was the story there, and yeah, and without direction, kids fall into some kind of criminality, and because they're marked as kids in care, the police know them, they can easily be picked up, and they soon get a criminal record. Yeah.
Mm. God, it just brings such sadness. Yeah, just to see that, you know, um, it's almost that with the boarding school parallel as well, the idea that you can sort of put your child into boarding school without checks and balances. These days, I think that there is amongst social work, there is an emphasis really to try and do something with the family first, make it into a number of interventions, try and help the family out to kind of improve things. Then, start looking at broader family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, who could help, how can this work? Then it's fostering. Then, last resort is group homes, things like that. But there are some checks and balances there. But as you said, back in the 70s and 80s, I did a podcast with Richard Scorer the other day, and he said they were like sweet shops for paedophiles. These institutions in the 70s and 80s, like I said, no vetting or little or no vetting, and because of the good name of the institution, when people were caught, they were sort of quietly moved on, whether it be care homes, boarding schools, churches, whatever. They've sort of just passed around the system. Have you got a
Yeah.
view on that?
Yeah. When I was preparing for talking to you today, Chris, I just reflected on the number of stories that we heard through the ICSA inquiry, where the lack of regulation or the weak regulation of homes and the failure to require heads or people who became aware of these offenders to report them to the authorities, plus the fact that there were reputations to be looked after, reputations to be guarded, added up to basically, these were boarding schools in particular, and residential schools, of course. Boarding schools in particular, for the cunning, educated abusers, were a place where you would know if in 1978, for instance, you wanted to go somewhere where even if you were caught, nothing would happen to you. The school wouldn't want a prosecution. The school wouldn't want the police involved. You'd just be moved on to the next job with a good reference, and that would be it. So even the abusers knew that they wouldn't get caught. So the people that wanted to abuse children found this kind of a soft spot and an easy place to go and do what they did. So I echo what Richard said. Yeah.
So sad. Yeah, I think, and I heard, I was in a discussion with someone the other day about the ICSA stuff, which we'll come on to, and particularly the DBS system. And people say, oh, we've got the DBS system. Yeah, it's great. Everyone checks and balances and enhanced checks and all the rest of it. I've been through that because of the work I do in schools and all sorts of, my therapeutic work, all the rest of it. It's dead easy. And the person said to me, who knows the system really well, says paedophiles don't tend to have criminal records. So because they are quite secretive, because they are often quite cunning, and they just haven't got records anyway. So the DBS system wouldn't even pick them up if it did. So it's do you care to comment on that?
Yeah, that's a that was a running theme of the ICSA. People weren't even DBS checked back then, and even if they were now, it wouldn't have made any difference. The one of the recommendations of ICSA was that care home staff should now be regulated and monitored. Thankfully, that's just coming into the crime and policing bill, so that's going to be an improvement. So thank you, government, for doing that. That's one down at least. One of the 20 recommendations from ICSA, so that's good. But yeah, if a person still today wants to avoid the system, they go to where organisations are weakly regulated, and we still know that neither Ofsted nor the Charities Commission nor ISI have safeguarding as a top priority in their inspections. It's sort of an afterthought. It's done, but it's not done to the extent that the educational standards are done in schools. So that really needs. I'm hoping that this Child Protection Authority will tighten that up and make safeguarding a high priority for regulators.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to that. Just for those who aren't too sure, the ISI is the Independent School Inspectorate, and amongst independent schools, they tend to be inspected either by Ofsted, ISA, or sort of a combination of the two. But I've often heard it said that the industry sort of marks its own homework, and that's something in itself. We will come back to that. But let's sort of set up the exhibit a bit more for those who don't know it too well. So ICSA, the Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse, finished about 3.5 years ago-ish, sort of October 22, I guess it would be. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It reported in 22, finished its work in late 2000, I think. So, sorry, 2020.
Yeah. So long process. How did you come to get involved with it? And what was your role?
Right. So when it was first mooted, you remember that Theresa May was the Home Secretary at the time. We were busy spending our time on the churches. We were, as campaigners, a group of us were unhappy at how the church were responding, and we thought there needed to be an inquiry into the churches in particular. We never thought that there would be a wide inquiry into everything, but so we were campaigning on that, and then along came all the Westminster allegations of Cyril Smith, etc., etc. And so Theresa May, probably down to some kind of political pressure, decided, right, we're going to do a full inquiry into all child sexual abuse in institutions and how institutions have responded to those allegations. So that happened. They became aware that I, and in fact Richard and a couple of others, were interested in this and had given it a lot of thought. So we had some meetings with the people who were basically setting up the inquiry. We told them, what they really need to look into, the different aspects of institutions that they need to look into, different cases that they needed to look into. And it grew from there. So the inquiry had, I think, 15 modules. Catholic and Church of England, other churches, children in custodial institutions, accountability and reparations. They did the Westminster stuff. They did Lord Janner and how organisations have responded to that. 15 in total, and there were 15 separate sort of reports, significant reports. Each inquiry lasted for about 3 weeks of actual hearing time. Thousands upon thousands of documents had to be read, and we were responsible as lawyers for finding good witnesses for the inquiry who could demonstrate the issues that were causing a problem. So that's how the inquiry worked. The panel was 4 people and chaired by Alexis J, who is now around still helping us with the Act on ICSA group to try and get all these 20 recommendations implemented. And it finally reported in October 2022 on the same day that Liz Truss resigned. So its recommendations were not the headlines that we'd expected them to have been on that day. So perhaps that's contributed to the lack of response from the Conservative then government, and now the Labour government. Now it's just taken so long. What we're in now, January 2026, and this was October 2022. It's taken a long time for them to get their act together, and they're still not really grasping it. But I suppose we'll come on to that a bit later. But yeah, you and I are still working on that, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely, David. And thanks for sharing the setup of it. And also, yeah, bless you for your time and your work on it, because it was an enormous amount of work that went into it. And, Alexia J was there on Monday at the Boarding on Insanity screening. She spoke afterwards about the need for getting on with these recommendations. I could feel the frustration, like to have gone through all of that. People like you, Richard, her, and all the survivors, my God, that call forward to give testimony. Bless you if you're listening, if you went and did that. And then to sit there afterwards and go, wow, we did a thing there. And then it's just like radio silence. Year after year. I mean, I can only, I wasn't involved in it then. I've come into it probably a year after that. So the frustration is just how you could taste it, that something's got to happen. But you mentioned there, so 20 recommendations. You mentioned couple and train, which language-wise means they're sort of going through the process. Actually, you'll describe this better than me, so I won't go into that. But can you just give us a little update on, out of the 20, what's where, without knowing that you can't go through all 20, but kind of some key highlights there.
Right. So there are 20 recommendations. The key ones for us, if we are seriously going to be interested in improving safeguarding for the future, for future generations, is the Child Protection Authority, and that is essentially designed to send out best practice guidelines, best practice to all institutions that look after children, so that everybody's doing the same thing. All regulators, such as Charity Commission, Department for Education, all regulators who are concerned with safeguarding are doing the same thing and doing it to a good standard. So that's the Child Protection Authority. There's the recommendation that we have a cabinet minister for children and safeguarding. That's not happened. The Child Protection Authority is in its embryonic stages. It's being consulted on at the moment. That consultation ends on the 5th of March 2026. So if you're listening to this, please look it up and send in your considered responses to it. It's quite complicated. I'm sure the Survivors Trust and Chris at Seen It and Heard will put up some kind of guidance to help you do it. Please complete it. So that's the Child Protection Agency. The minister. One of the problems with civil justice is that horrible defendants who want to avoid responsibility try to say that we're out of time if we try and bring a civil claim. So we've argued for that time limit on these types of cases to be swept away. There is a bill going through, part of the crime and policing bill is to do just that. There is currently lots of argument and amendments going through the House of Lords. The suggestion that has come out of government is not adequate. It needs seriously changing. I won't go into the boring details, but we're hoping that the government will change its mind on that and actually do what the ICSA told it to do. So that's David, time limits.
Not break train too much, but for those, the out of time thing is, England and Wales sort of expected someone who'd been sexually abused as a child to have come forward by their 21st birthday. If they hadn't done, then when a case was brought, many years later, and we know that it takes upwards of 25 plus years on average for a sexual abuse survivor to come to terms and to start to disclose that abuse, is then the defence would say, you're out of time, they should have disclosed by 21. The courts then had some latitude to be able to allow someone to bring a case later on, but straight away in any sort of complaint, you're into an adversarial situation where the defendant is automatically got a sort of bit of a get out of jail free card to wave around at the start, this out of time, and then it's straight over back to the person making the complaint, their legal team who are already traumatized, etc. So what we're saying here is we just do away with that limitation. Is that what's there?
That's right. Do away with that limitation. Well, to the extent that the new test should be that a defendant organisation would have to show that a fair trial would not be possible. You can imagine it's quite a high bar to reach that, which is only right, I think. But it means that the law is still human rights compliant. For instance, if you were suing an individual, that individual still has human rights. It has a right to be able to argue its case at court, or that aspect of the case at court. And if it didn't have that that bar of that test of is a fair trial possible, then it wouldn't be human rights compliant. So that's fair enough. So hopefully that will go through in the next 3 to 5 months. I'm working on that, as are other people. So hopefully that will go through. Yeah, it's really important. That is really, really important, because if that doesn't go through, then we're still stuck with the same awful situation in which lots of people have found themselves either unable to pursue cases through the court, or being advised by lawyers that the case can't be pursued because of these time limits. And even in many cases, the risk of losing because of these time limits has meant that defendant organizations can say, well, we think you're going to lose, but we'll give you a smaller sum of money because of the risk that you're going to fail. And lots of people say, yeah, I don't want to fail, so I'll take half of what I'm claiming, for instance, just because there's a big risk there.
Yeah,
So
thank you, David.
That's been a problem for a lot of people, and that brings me on to the recommendation, which was the redress scheme. So the inquiry overall recognised that there were these barriers, not just the psychological barriers of people coming forward and feeling that the civil justice system is adversarial. Excuse me. You have to prove your case. You have to argue your case. You have to have it picked through. In some cases, you have to be seen by a psychologist or psychiatrist who is hostile to you and your case, and will try and pick out the very worst parts of your case and emphasize them. So your whole life is picked over in that adversarial process. And it just puts people off in the first place, and the brave people that actually do it don't feel as though they've had a good ride at all, and they actually get a very, very rough ride. So to get around this, the inquiry came up with the idea, which was actually supported on all sides, not just the claimants, but also supported to some extent by a lot of the defendant organisations, that a scheme should be set up, a no-fault scheme should be set up, which basically says if you can prove that you were at this institution and abused by this person or other, then you should receive some compensation. So that would be non-adversarial, decided by an independent body, whether it's government funded, which I would say it doesn't need to be, or whether it's funded by the institutions, it can work. Just to give you a bit more detail on the funding of it, Australia, the state of Victoria, set up this type of scheme, which required defendant organisations to sign up to it, and if they didn't, they would lose their charitable status or government funding, as they put it. And lots of organisations have signed up and have contributed their shares to compensating people. For instance, if Joe Bloggs goes to the scheme and says, look, I want £50,000 for my case because it's really bad, then that organisation, whatever it be, a church, a school, or whatever, it has to stump up the £50,000. The government pays it out in the first place, but the organisation then reimburses the government. So that's worked well across there. I think it can work here.
Thank you.
The situation with here is that the government have said we're not going to do that. Point blank refused. So I'm in charge of putting it together as a campaign for the Association of Child Abuse Lawyers, and we're due to launch that in February. So hopefully the government will pay attention to that and do something about it. I'm not all that hopeful, but we've got to do something.
Well, thank you for sharing that, David, and for the detail. I think we'll be behind you on that campaign for sure. Two things, something to note from what you said as well. Speaking to Kim Leslie at Derwent Mitchell the other day, Scotland, they've had this limitation law removed in 2017. So that has improved the situation in Scotland. They've also got the redress scheme as part of the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry that's going through at the moment. So when we look at, and we'll come on to talk about mandatory reporting, I'm sure as well. But when we look at that, it's almost, well, I look at this and say England and Wales are way out of date and way behind the curve on so many legislative things, but on this particularly, I'm right in saying that we are way behind.
That's right. We are. We are behind the curve on the redress and the limitation. Yeah, we are. And mandatory reporting as well. We're behind other jurisdictions. Do you want me to carry on with the recommendations, Chris?
Thank you. Yeah. It's just clearing them up as we go. Otherwise, there's lots of them, and so it gets a bit just keep them in nice, neat boxes so that people get their heads around what why we when they hear CPA or they hear a limitation. It's not just sort of lawyerese. It's like this is serious stuff that impacts a hell of a lot of abuse survivors, and is the reason why people don't come forward, or they come forward, and the reason why 2 years into something they need serious mental health support because the system's pulling them apart, because the opposition psychiatrist is trashing them, or they can't get anywhere near a court because there isn't a redress scheme or whatever. It's like this is real human life stuff. So yeah, please do
definitely
through the rest. Yeah.
So mandatory reporting. It was the inquiry recommended this. This is a concept of not everybody, but just a group of people called who are working in regulated activities. That is basically teachers, health workers, youth workers, that's official youth workers, and statutory organisations like police, that kind of thing. They would be required, if they were told, or if they found out that there's a reasonable suspicion that someone has been sexually assaulted, a child has been sexually assaulted, it would be their duty to tell either the police or the council about it, so they could do their investigations. So that is something that is coming into force in the next year or so. So that's very good. There have been some who say that as it's drafted, as it's coming in, it's not strong enough because it doesn't create a criminal offence of failing to do it. There is still debate about that. My feeling is that as it is at the moment, it's designed to raise everybody's expectations that if you hear about this, you've got to do something about it. You've really got to report in, and if you don't, then you may not face criminal sanction, but your professional body is going to discipline you if it's found out that you haven't done it. So if you're a police officer and you haven't reported it, you're going to face discipline. You're going to lose your job. If you're a teacher and you've done the same, you'll probably lose your job. So that's sort of where it's pitched, I think, and I hope that's where it actually lands and what happens. So everybody in those organisations, in that position, knows that they've got to report, and that will lift us up to the same levels as some other countries who already do this. So yeah, it would be definitely a step forward, and it is a step forward. It might be that it's not working well, and when it's analysed, some of the detractors who want it to be criminalised are proved right, and we should do that. There's time to do that in years to come if the analysis of the reporting shows that not enough people are reporting it.
Yeah, thank you, David. I know that this is an area where, I'm a sort of pretty staunch hardliner on mandatory reporting, and that's okay that I kind of get the idea that let's just get something on the statute books, because right now there's nothing, and that is heartbreaking. Um, I would say, effective mandatory reporting, yes, criminal sanction, and yes, there'd be protection for whistleblowers and people coming forward. And I think what is in there at the moment is quite weak. It is quite watered down. But I also do hear people when they say, for God's sake, if you go for optimal, they'll just hoof it out of the crime and policing bill. Nothing will get done, and you'll be back to square one. So get it in, get something happening, get this attention elevated, as you've said, amongst institutions, because they'll have to do some mandatory training on it and things like that, because it's now legislative. And once they see that, actually, because what's designed there is supposed to make sure there's not too many more reports, because actually the worry behind it is it overwhelms the system, even though that's not borne out anywhere in the world. That it overwhelms the system, and good teachers will be harangued out of their jobs, and all this sort of stuff. So I get it. It's nuanced, it's difficult, but there is something in the police and crime bill on mandatory reporting. So just in the interest of time, is there any others you'd like to pick out? So I've heard, CPA, mandatory reporting, limitations and out of time, and some of the other ones you've spoken out. Are there any others you just want to pick out for everyone that's really important?
The next most important one is probably collecting data, getting a proper data set of, child sexual abuse in different settings. What we know at the moment is that police forces, local authorities, and other institutions don't have a standard way of measuring all this and reporting in. So this Child Protection Authority will hopefully be tasked with doing that and setting up some kind of working group that standardizes data collection so that we can work out where it's happening, who's doing it, what social groups are doing it. We need to be able to. Well, the idea behind the whole thing is that we get ahead of the curve. We target people who are doing it or vulnerable groups before it happens, make sure that they can avoid it happening in the first place. So having better data will be really helpful. So that's really, really important. A couple of others, minor ones, are the registration of care workers, which I've previously mentioned earlier, 10 minutes ago or so. Care workers working in these care homes for 16 to 18-year-olds, they're not required to be registered at the moment, and they should be, and they will be under new legislation. And enhanced sentences for exploitation offences is also something that is coming in, which is an improvement. It's a minor one, but it's an improvement. Yeah.
Thank you, David. Thanks very much. And so at CPA, it's very topical. There's consultation going until March. This podcast will come out in February 26th. So there is time to input on that. I've heard some fears from campaigners about the CPA, is that it ends up being really sort of another Quango, and it doesn't actually have any powers, any powers to make anything happen. So are there a couple of things in that in the consultation that's going on? It's like the CPA must do ABC. What, in your mind, what's the ABC without, so that people listening can understand?
Right. So this Child Protection Authority is, forgive me for reading this, but I'm going to read so it's clear. It's designed to issue guidance to improve minimum standards for child protection by institutions, including statutory agencies like councils and police. It's designed to provide advice to government in relation to policy on child protection, and to reform and improve child protection. It's also designed to inspect and enforce standards in institutions as it considers necessary. So to answer your question, I would say that it's absolutely essential that the Child Protection Agency has some powers to enforce what it says. If you've got an institution such as, I don't know, a police force that is regularly ignoring crimes that are reported to it, and not taking any action on them, which is its statutory function, and it's leading to abusers being out there on the street, continuing to abuse, then it's not protecting children. It's not safeguarding them. And if so, the Child Protection Authority would tell it about its errant behaviour in the first place, give it warnings, and if it failed to adhere to those warnings, failed to change its ways, then it's essential that it should be able to prosecute it in some way for not following those warnings. We have the Health and Safety Executive at the moment, which is a body that basically protects people at work from industrial accidents. And if factories are creating dangerous working environments, the Health and Safety Executive will go in, inspect, tell them to clean the whole thing up, put guardrails around X, Y, and Z machine, and if they don't do that, they can prosecute them or close them down. This is the type of enforcement action that we need from the Child Protection Authority. Without that, it's going to be toothless. It is going to be this quango that you've mentioned. Yeah.
Thank you, David. So really hearing that's really, really clear. Thank you. Just so that we can sort of segue from ICSA, incredible amount of work that's gone into it. It's sort of moving at the moment. There is still campaigning work and energy left to do, and it really does matter, not only to the people that gave evidence, but we know that only 1 in 9 childhood sexual abuse survivors ever comes forward. So that's 8 in 9 who are out there, who might be listening, who might be affected, who and the changes need to be for them as well. So that perhaps if they feel that they're in the right space it's easier then to come forward, start speaking, and to find justice and healing. When you mentioned it a few times, and sort of what Seen and Heard's all about, boarding schools within ICSA got a good hearing about, admittedly, sort of weeks were spent on Ampleforth and 2 hours were spent on another 10 over here that were equally as bad or whatever, but they did, really did the best with what they had available, etc. There will always be some who feel, X schools or X person wasn't heard properly, but boarding schools really came through. What were the sort of patterns and issues that you saw, particularly in boarding schools as part of ICSA, and also in the 20, 30 years you've been, doing boarding school civil claims, etc. What was happening in them and to people?
If I look back on the evidence that I heard at ICSA, mainly from Ampleforth and Downside boarding schools, and in fact Ealing Abbey as well, all Catholic run institutions, but I suppose that doesn't set them aside from ordinary boarding schools. It was that they developed into sort of closed shops. The police in their local areas were afraid to go in, didn't want to tread on the toes of headmasters. Parents were sometimes resistant to complain if they found out about something. Other teachers certainly wouldn't dob in their fellow teachers. So they became places that were closed shops. And what was happening was that people, if they had offended, and if a headmaster did think that person had done something wrong, and a lot of them just swept things under the carpet. If a headmaster was unhappy about someone, they could segregate them, or try to segregate them, or pass them on to another school. In a lot of cases, they were passed on to other schools, but we heard stories at both Ealing Abbey and Ampleforth that these teachers were still, even after, on a couple of occasions, after being convicted of sex offences against pupils were still allowed to remain on site, living on site, and have contact with children, which I thought was shocking. I don't know why the police didn't do something about it. It was a horrible situation. So why was that happening? It's a mixture of it's all to do, I suppose, with reputation. The reputation of the school as being this great institution is protected by itself and by people connected with it, parents or people in the local community. For instance, the police just weren't going into these places and opening them up as they should have done. So yeah, that was a pattern that I saw from the ICSA in my own experience of running these cases. It's more common for me to have seen people being passed on to different schools than it is for them to be sheltered within the school. Yeah, so that's what I've seen.
Thank you. And then so those are the complaints, how things were moving around in the claims then brought against schools. I know you'll have a really broad cross section. There'll be the best practice schools who say, because it's not an admission of liability to say we're categorically and unreservedly sorry, to an abuse survivor who makes a complaint. That's okay. We know that's okay. And then there can be a really good process of making sure they can access therapeutic support, make sure that communications are then clear amongst staff and parents and former pupils, having a really trauma-informed approach. We're working with, one of the biggest schools in Scotland to help them rewrite their policies on this exact thing of non-recent abuse. So they want to get it right. That's lovely. That's gold standard. What's the reality? And what have you seen out there of the schools that do something different to that?
Gosh. So I've been dealing with just recently a case of a school which is now closed in the Sheffield area, in which a boy was badly treated. It's not sexual abuse, but badly treated. But it's the same scenario really in terms of their response, and it was to protect its reputation, to blame the victim in the first place for doing some kind of wrong, and then trying to cover it up from the local authority by writing an erroneous report, which absolved the school and its staff from any kind of blame, and then it had to be. It was only down to the parents being really tenacious that they were able to demonstrate to the council, to the local authority designated officer, that this report from the school had been erroneous. So yeah, it's what's still happening is that schools are trying to protect their reputations. Yes, from being considered a place where children can be harmed. We know that children can be harmed at all schools, but to not respect that fact and not understand it is probably doing more harm than good.
Thank you very much, David. I mean, that to me, after 20-odd year career in the corporate world, worked for some of the biggest companies in the world, consumer goods companies. It's like if you have customer service, your customers come to you and say, this product is faulty, and it's the equivalent of kind of going, well, don't know, that might be your problem. That might be you, how you use it, really. Or, I don't. Well, we've not heard from anyone else that product's faulty, so maybe it's just you. Or all these sorts of things, all going straight back at them. We do not accept your criticism of our product. Now, to most people, they go, well, you wouldn't last long as a business if you did that as customer services. But These schools, we hear the big ones are, that was the last lot. So a lot of these schools have changed hands. Their entities have changed hands many times, from different limited companies to another, charitable foundations, etc. So they go, oh, well, that happened under the sort of watch of three businesses before us, so that's not really our problem. Heard that one. Very, very recently, 3 or 4 schools, with the approach of, oh, I'm terribly sorry that happened to you. It's very surprising. It's very surprising that happened to you, because we're such a wonderful pillar of, goodness and wonder in the world. Are you sure? Yeah, that's a classic. And when the other, the other ones are, oh, you're the only one. I'm very sorry that happened to you, but you're the only one. When we know that there are 8 or 9 other people with live claims against that school. So it's like, how do you think you're even going to get away with that? And I think that's why they're getting such a hammering in the press in Scotland and in England all the time, because it's so ill-advised. I mean, if I was their lawyer, or if I was their PR advisor, or in the marketing department, I'd be saying it's commercial suicide to do this, and yet many still do. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, you would have thought that a response from a head teacher to say, right, okay, let's get an independent investigation into this. Let's work out exactly what happened. We shouldn't do it. Someone else should do it, to work out the facts, and then present it to whoever, and to be open and honest with parents and the pupils themselves. It would be the best way. What's the problem with honesty? That's what I've always said. So yeah, wouldn't it demonstrate the strength of the school by living up to these things? I used to say it with the churches. The inquiry, the exit inquiry, they had a golden opportunity just before the inquiry started to say, right, we're going to do a proper audit of everything. We're going to kick people out who we think have offended, and we're going to sort all this out. We're going to live up to what we preach. We're going to do a really nice job on this. But they didn't. They went into the ICSA with an adversarial approach, and they tried to diminish the problems, and they made themselves look really foolish. So yeah, you would have thought that a strong leader, a strong school with a reputation for honesty would be preferable to parents than one over which there might be a slight cloud, or the people might have heard rumors of things happening in the past. Yeah, I'm constantly surprised at parents who ignore these problems, and are just focused on on the good things. We as parents, and we as people, as adults, have to be vigilant to these issues. And if we think there's something wrong, we need to speak up. We all need to look out for each other. So why parents do this and ignore what could be a serious problem, I don't understand.
Thank you, David. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, we could do another podcast when I put my psychology hat on as to why the parents don't and why the schools don't. Because for me, when particularly if you've come through a system, let's say you went through the system yourself, probably if you're in charge of a school at this point, you went through in the 60s, 70s and 80s, and goodness knows what happened to you. You might now be in charge of that institution. Your strategic survival personality, your stuff will be set at a very young age, and it will have stayed there. And therefore, the sort of dog ate my homework or predator approach, which is attack is the best form of defense, they're very young strategies, and many of these, I see it in CEOs, I see it in the government, in politicians, I see it in people who've been through this system, who run the schools. I see the trauma, and obviously Boarding on Insanity, the film tells you about that so much. The one you watched on Monday, where these wounded leaders will kind of obfuscate and pass the buck and all that, because they don't know any different. It's their wound. So thank you. But there is work to do, and I'm say this. We're working with a big school in Scotland, and boarding school association, and now finally after 2 years of asking, they're saying, come and do a talk to our members about the proper communication and treatment of anyone coming forward with non-recent complaints, and what is the way to treat alumni, because alumni aren't just a cash machine to pay for your new sports hall. They are your customers. They are the people that went through your system, and they need looking after. So very, very important stuff that's happening. Great. We're coming short on time. We always do, but the most important bit for me is we talk legislation, we talked all sorts, but human beings is what I'm about, and the healing journey, and justice, and people being seen and heard. That's why we're called what we are. For anyone going through a process, perhaps they were abused, perhaps they're starting to talk to people around them. Maybe they have reached out to the police. Maybe they've just had a conversation with a solicitor like yourself. Or maybe they're just sort of thinking, I've heard a lot about this now. Maybe this is something I need to explore. Do you have any guidance on how to prepare for that journey, perhaps, and what support is out there?
All right, just to prepare a person for the journey, if guidance is what they want, I would say that it's not easy. It's going to be hard work. Prepare yourself for at times quite a rocky ride. You've got to be in a decent place in your life, or to have really good support to withstand it, so that it doesn't harm your mental health. But it might be that you just seek validation, and you want to confront this thing and soak it up, make it part of your life, and deal with it, which a lot of my clients want to do, and do successfully. So that's the first thing. It's not going to be easy, but I would say, it's definitely a lot easier if you do have someone who is really highly trusted by you, to share your feelings with. Not necessarily the story of what happened to you, but just what do they call it? To debrief afterwards. If you're having a sort of an interview with the police, or you're going to see a solicitor in private, then you come out of the room and you need someone to talk to either decompress, that's the word, to either talk about what they've just been through in the interview, or to just take their minds off it and go and do a bit of grocery shopping or whatever. Just do something every day to take your mind off it. It's important to have someone else there to help you along, someone that you can trust, that you can ring up every now and then to say, look, I'm not feeling all that great today. What do you think I should do? So that's really important if you've got someone like that. If you haven't, then think about starting some kind of therapy. Get yourself on an NHS waiting list. I know they are long. If you've got the means to pay for some therapy yourself, at least invest in half a dozen sessions at the outset and see how that goes. Because just putting the whole thing into some kind of perspective, your own internal perspective, is really important, because you might feel the whole process is getting out of control, and that could help you. This friend, who you can call, who you can rely on, can keep you in perspective also. And that brings me on to the issue of control. If you're doing this, you need to feel in control. It's got to be done at your pace. Don't let anybody push you into something. Do it at your pace. Don't let the police push you into something. Don't let a solicitor push you into something. You do it when you're ready to do it. I would recommend that you talk to the police, and that's probably your first port of call. If you're unsure about that, then go and see a solicitor, because solicitors, specialist solicitors such as myself, have the whole perspective. They can see the whole view, all the different routes that you can take, all the different possibilities as to how it might go. We can be frank with you. We can say, look, you're going to be disappointed. This is not going to go anywhere. But if you want to do it, do it. If you want to get a prosecution out of it, it's not going to happen, we'll tell you. But if it's positive, we'll also tell you. And there are all sorts of different avenues that you can go down. You can complain to the police. You can complain to the council. You can complain to the school. You can pursue a compensation claim. You can pursue a criminal injuries compensation claim. These are all things that can be done. You can complain to a regulator, such as the Department for Education or Charities Commission, all that. All these are things that can be done, and which the police won't advise you about, but solicitors, good solicitors, know about, and they can help you feel as though you're doing something, you're actually standing up for yourself, and you are in control of this. Yeah, so control, I think, overall is the word. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, appreciate your thoughts. Then, I when sadly we get hundreds of people who come to See and Heard every year who were abused in their boarding schools, or also in their family of origin, or the schools or whatever, as well. We say a few things, which is support. So get your support network, and start to find that trusted person around. And we would always say to find someone also professionally. And so, See and Heard, we help people connect with specialists. We help fund it if they haven't got the money to. We have the free sharing groups. There are lots of other charities out there doing incredible work around us as well. So, reaching out to those support networks, so that you're well armed for the journey ahead. And also, you can, when you start to talk to a solicitor or the police or anyone, you've already got the support network in place. And then you sort of the emotional healing side of things, which is being seen and heard, seeking justice, is very important. Integration, which is kind of the psychological word of what David was talking about, sort of making this part of your life, what happened, part of your life. Because the thing with abuse and trauma is it's not what happens, it's what you make it mean. So if you can work that through with someone, the right professional, the right context, and you make what happened mean something else, i.e., it wasn't your fault, there's no shame around it, this is purely down to the perpetrator and the institution and the setup, that change in belief can send your life on a completely different course for the rest of it. And it's just never too late. So lots of support, speaking to the right people, control, and not being pushed into doing things that David has talked about, and emotional healing. Sometimes that day in court doesn't give the emotional healing. The emotional healing has to happen alongside it, but it can help. So as we bring things to a close, David, anything, final thoughts you'd like to mention before we finish today?
Well, thank you for all the work that you're doing. I think your organisation, Seen and Heard, and the website and all the resources on there are a massive help to people who are looking into this, either for the first time or just delving back into what could be done in their cases. So yeah, I feel as though we're with your website and the people around you, you are making some inroads. Can I just say that when we were at that meeting on Monday night, it occurred to me that I've heard so much about the evidence gathering on what's gone wrong in boarding schools, and its effect on children and as they progress into adulthood. That it strikes me that there must be, heads of these organizations that operated these schools must have known the harm that they were doing to children. And when you know that you're doing harm to someone, you stop it. You find a way to do no harm. That's the basis of the law of negligence, at least. So it's just occurs to me that with all this research that we've got now, and I know that there's a specialist professor called Pippa in the organisation. I forget her last name, but she's working at a university in London. And with all the research that she's doing, I'm sure that there's a way that we can pull this together and try to get some traction with some kind of inquiry, whether it's official or unofficial, and work out, who's been responsible for this. Were there points in the road in which either schools or the Department for Education knew that the boarding school regimes have been harming children and shouldn't have been allowed to continue? It just strikes me that there's so much out there of the harm that's done, particularly to children in boarding school, that it should have stopped at some point. I want to know who knew about that and when it was, and whether we can hold someone responsible, because there's been a lot of suffering by children that have been to boarding school.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for mentioning that. And again, we spoke about it before we came on. The Boarding on Insanity film and all this work. It's not just about abuse. It's about as Nick Duffel would call it, the sort of privileged abandonment. It's the neglect side of things. It's I wasn't sexually abused at my boarding school, but by God, it did a number on me. The physical abuse, the bullying, the being away from home, the regimes, the coldness, the lack of food. It was brutal, and that was in the 80s, 90s, after the Children's Act, and the independent schools were still beating children for 10 years after it was banned. So people knew about this, and I hear what you're saying there. So the person you mentioned was Pippa Palmer at the London South Bank University. They've got a newly established and very well put together community of practice around boarding school harm, and they are starting to gather data and evidence around this. So David's details will be in the show notes of this podcast. You'll be able to reach him and his firm, and because it's been mentioned as well, practitioners and professionals in this area can contact Pippa Palmer and the LSBU project as well as others. But thank you so much for your work in this area, David, for your time, your energy. It's a long fight. You've been fighting a long time, and I believe things are moving. They will never move as fast or as far enough as we all want as campaigners or survivors. But we're going in the right direction on many things, and I think there are reasons to be positive behind this. But people power stuff now. We've seen what's going on right now around smartphones and social media bans for under 16s. So, it's people power stuff now. No one's coming to save us. We have to do it ourselves. So, whether it's campaigning, whether it's bringing forward your truth, your experiences, there are people now listening, and the systems are starting to improve to support. So thank you very much for your time, David Greenwood. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, Chris. Thank you.
Beautiful. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening. It's been the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I've been with David Greenwood from Switalskis Solicitors. And huge thanks for your time and energy watching. Please do share. Please do come along and listen to the next one. And as always, take care. Thank you very much, and see you later.